Hey there, I'm Ashley, and this is New Day with Ashley. If you're looking for inspiration to make a difference and create lasting impact, then you're in the right place. Get ready to be encouraged by the stories of my guests who have taken risks, overcome challenges, and created opportunities. It's time to make the most of your new day. It's safe to say my guest today is a Fargo Moorhead Recruiter, but more importantly, a proud and passionate resident that deeply cares about his city. Charley Johnson is the president and CEO of the Fargo Moorhead Convention and Visitors Bureau. Charley and his team work to position our distinctive community as a desirable destination and gateway to the region and nation, resulting in a superior quality of life for our residents. You betcha this conversation is one that makes this north of normal community one of the greatest places on earth. Well, welcome to New Day with Ashley, Charley Johnson.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. And President, CEO of the Fargo Moorhead Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Correct. And also West Fargo.
And West Fargo.
Not officially in the title, but we certainly serve West Fargo too.
Sure.
So.
And surrounding, I suppose.
Well,
almost.
right. We're funded by the lodging tax from those three cities. So that's our primary responsibility. Do we slop out a little bit? Is slop a good word? But, we certainly promote the
whole area.
The metropolitan area. See, I already did it. I already touched the microphone. We promote the metropolitan area, but there are some attractions that we certainly include in our promotional stuff that are not necessarily right in the metro area.
Sure.
Or near the metro area.
And I have more questions about that because I thought that was interesting about the tax. But let's go back. So you said you grew up in Fergus Falls.
Fergus Falls through 8th grade. We lived in St. Paul till I was 4, I think. So I have very vague memories of that. But then I went all through grade school and junior high. Well, yeah, what you call junior high, I guess, through 8th grade in Fergus. And then my dad, who was a pharmacist, bought a drugstore in Hastings, Minnesota, which is used to be a sleepy little river town, outside of St. Paul, but it's kind of a suburb, and really had been by that time. So that's where I graduated from high school.
And then
came to Concordia College.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, almost went to the University of Minnesota, but I decided I needed to get a little farther away from home.
Really?
So, yeah. And I've pretty much been here ever since. My first real job after college was in Grand Forks in radio for a little over a year, but then moved back down here.
So is that what you went to school for then? Broadcast?
Kind of, but I was a speech and theater major at Concordia because at the time they didn't have communications. So interesting thing there. I mean, I was interested in broadcasting from when I was in high school. In fact, I worked in the high school radio station.
Oh, okay.
Or, I mean, in the local radio station when I was in high school.
Sure.
We had an English teacher. I think you said you went to MSUM?
Yes.
We had an English teacher there who I will never forget because he was such a huge influence on my life. Bill Schultz was his name. He came from MSU at the time,
Sure.
Moorhead State, or MSC maybe it was, Moorhead State College.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was an English teacher in Hastings, and he was pretty much right out of school, I think. And somehow or other, he convinced the administration at Hastings, Minnesota High School to let him offer a journalism class. To juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
So there were I remember being one of like 11 or 12 of us, and it was a lot of my friends because we worked in the high school paper and and did different things, and a lot of kids from theater were interested in that kind of stuff too because I was in theater in high school. And at the same time, I had started working part-time at the radio station doing baseball games for the high school baseball games, and then also disc jockeying on Sundays. So that's really how I got the bug for it. And he was really quite a good teacher. I mean, we learned a lot, about the basics of journalism and I remember one day, probably, I think it was a whole year class, not just a semester, but anyway, in the spring he was saying, so after all we've talked about here, what, if you could go out and be a journalist right now, you're 25 years old and you can get a job and you can go wherever you want to go, where would be the hottest news place you'd want to go? And we're all looking at each other, and we don't want to say this, but we all wanted, you should probably go to Vietnam because that's when the war was at its height. And so I don't know that anyone would have taught us to think like that at that point in high school. So anyway, he was a big influence. And so I almost went to the University of Minnesota. In fact, I had a first quarter tuition scholarship from the Minnesota High School Press Association, the University of Minnesota, with a letter signed by, no one remembers this around here, but the longtime chair of the journalism department at U of M. He was famous in journalism circles, Mitch Charley. You get this letter, and you'll get this, first quarter tuition scholarship to study journalism. And of course, at the time, I'm pretty old, actually, so this is going to give it away, I guess. But
You're
at the time,
fooling me.
it was just 1 quarter, right? So then there were 3 quarters, quarter system then. A quarter tuition at the University of Minnesota was $125. And I showed that to my dad. I said, hey, look, I got a scholarship, blah, blah, blah. He says, and I was still thinking about Concordia. I'd applied at both places. And he says, $125 is not enough money to base your decision on. I said, yeah, I guess you're probably right. So even in 1968, that wasn't enough money to really make it. But anyway, I still thought about going, but then I had a bunch of friends, who had graduated the year before and went to schools up in the Twin Cities, and of course they all had cars, and it was great because every weekend they'd come back down and hang out with us, right? But by about Christmas time, I remember having this very weird, oddly mature thought for a 17-year-old at the time. These guys are not making new friends.
Right.
They're not, college doesn't seem to be that great an experience for them. They're going there and going to their classes, I think. Maybe they weren't.
Right.
Some of them weren't, I'm quite certain. But they're back here every weekend hanging out with us, and I said, I don't know if that's the right way to go. So that kind of influenced me to, in the end, go to Concordia, which did not have journalism, so I took speech and theater instead.
Okay. So it wasn't even an option to take that.
No.
But was that Concordia's way or your thought of like, well, I'm still getting that?
I guess getting away from
experience.
Home was more important to me.
Okay.
than,
and making new friends.
Well, and I
making
had
a
liked
difference.
theater too,
Yeah.
and I didn't feel like I was necessarily going to be totally divorced from that opportunity because the summer before, between my graduating in the spring and before I went off to Concordia, actually I got to work full time at the radio station that summer.
Okay.
Huge money for a kid, right? 7 days a week, $50 a week.
Wow.
So, but I loved it. It was great, and so I kept, and I assumed I would get hired back the next spring, and I did briefly, but then I asked the guy who owned the radio station, who we knew because he sold advertising to my dad at the drugstore anyway, and he went to our church and blah, blah, blah. Great guy. But when I came back that next spring, I said, I kind of would like to have 1 day off a week, so I would work 6 days and maybe $75 a week. And he says, okay, you drive a hard bargain, blah, blah, blah. So like 3 weeks in, he comes to me and says, so I hired another high school kid who'll do it for 7 days and 50. So he let me go.
Wow.
Like, what?
You need me here.
That's how valued I was.
No.
So the plus for that was, which also helped me keep my foot in this, and actually was a huge influence on me too in the end when I think about it, especially from a television standpoint. So the guy, it was a small radio station, dawn to dusk, literally in Hastings, Minnesota, and he needed engineers, so he'd just hire engineers from KSTP Television. He had to deal with them in Minneapolis, and they would come down on weekends or for emergencies and just tune up the transmitter. So I kind of got to know these guys. Mm-hmm. And so the last weekend I was working after that, the guy named George Merrill came down. He was one of the chief engineers at KSTP in Minneapolis, and I got to chat with these guys because they were always there on weekends, and that's when I was always there. I was always there on weekends. And so the guy said, I hear your things didn't work out for you. And I said, yeah, I guess he just, I was too expensive for him. He says, well, that's crazy. He says, if you want, KSTP is hiring production assistants. We would call them now. I called them floor directors then. Go see this guy, Ken Berry. He gave me the guy's name. He said, you can use me as a reference. I'm the chief engineer up there. And I said, okay. So I went and I didn't get a job like that day, but I got the interview because of him, right?
Sure, right.
And then the guy said, I don't have any openings right now. If something comes along, I'll call you. So like 3 days later, I'm laying in bed at home with no job and no prospects. My folks are down at the drugstore. I'm sleeping till 11. There's no air conditioning in the house. And I'm like, what am I going to do for the rest of the summer and make some money? And the phone rings, and it's this Ken Berry guy. He says, hey, I do have an opening for you. And I said, okay, when do you want me there? He says, can you be here by 2:00?
Wow.
So then I worked that summer and the next summer at KSTP.
And that's in the Twin Cities?
In the Twin Cities,
Okay.
yes. It was at the time it was the NBC affiliate then, but it's ABC now.
And
Anyway,
so now you're running cameras.
well, not they had an
Okay.
engineering staff that ran cameras there. They had a union, so we were actually just the ones who stand by. We'd count down
yeah.
things. Had a variety of different things, but the plus was that before there were 3 of us on every shift, and I worked the night shift. And so we did the 6 and 10 p.m. newscasts. And with 3 of us on the shift, one person, we'd rotate. One person got the studio ready, and then 2 guys went in the newsroom. It was always guys. There weren't any women, as I recall, at that time. Sorry. That's the way it seemed to be back in those days. But women were
we've
starting to
evolved.
work in the newsroom then, so you could see a shift coming. But anyway, one would go in and separate the script pages, tear them apart because it was menial duty, and then the other one would gather the visuals. So, how you have a character generator that puts your name, all this fancy graphics now. Well, in those days, meh, we had what we called supercards for superimposed names. So when you saw the name of someone come on the screen,
Charley Johnson comes up.
Mark
Yep.
Dayton, governor, whatever. He wasn't then, of course. But anyway, that was actually white printed, hot pressed in a department. They had a hot press department at the TV station for not just for news but for other things too. And they'd set the type and blah blah blah. So it was a white print on a black card, and then we got one of us would gather all these cards and set them up in order on an easel, and one TV camera was dedicated to those. So it would be, if you had the cards, it was you and a camera guy, and you had
You're
your
holding
heads.
the card?
No, they're sitting on an easel, but you changed them in between.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, so that seems pretty easy, right? One night, the only time a director ever really got mad at me, for some reason, I might have been daydreaming. I don't know. They're telling us what's on, and for some reason, I thought they were done with the card, so I just pulled it. Well, of course, the camera was still on it, so the address of this place just kind of flew vertically across the screen. Like, oh my God, I thought that Ed Kent was the director, I thought
Charlie, you had one job.
Yeah,
No, I'm kidding.
that was basically it, yeah. I thought he was going to come unglued afterwards, but he forgave me, I guess. So. Anyway, but then we just hung around the newsroom, and it was fun to hang out with those guys. And I really kind of got the bug, the news bug there, because it was just fun to hear them talk, how they work.
In that live environment.
Yes, yeah, and there were some guys who were very well known that I got to hang out with there, in Twin Cities television news, and a couple of whom you see some, I want to really be like that guy. He's a nice guy, treats people well,
Right.
and they're all skilled. This guy's really good on the job, but I don't really want to be like him because he's kind of an ass.
Sure, right.
Can I say that on a podcast?
Yeah, you just did.
Yeah.
No.
Weird thing was, one guy was almost lost his. One of it was 2 men co-anchoring. I won't go into their names at the time, but one guy, the kind of arrogant one who treated us like crap. He says, "Get away from me, peons."
Wow. Yeah.
But then, while I was gone away to school, I heard that he had been called on the carpet, and they were thinking about letting him go, and he had to clean up his act, and the ratings primarily being the thing, of course. And so that next spring when I got back, he was like the nicest guy in the world,
Wow.
He'd come down and talk to us, and, I don't know
Just
what
being
happened. I
nice
don't know
goes a
what
long
I don't know
ways,
what changed him. Yeah, I hope it was permanent. Anyway.
But a lesson in that. Being nice
Sorry,
goes-
that's a long story.
No.
But that's how I ended up getting, even though I went to
Into-
Concordia and was a theater major, I still kept my foot in the possibility of broadcasting.
So that was while you were.
That was while I was in college.
In
The
college.
two summers I worked
Okay.
there, yeah.
So then what happens after college? You graduate from Concordia.
I did graduate, yes.
Congratulations. Yes.
Barely. Yeah. Thanks to someone who helped me finish it incomplete. Oh man, I don't know how much detail do you want. Actually, the first
you
job
stayed here.
The first job I took was did take me out of town briefly. It was so when I was at Concordia. Also, I was we had a thing called student productions, and in those days, Concordia actually had the biggest concert house. The field house was the biggest concert hall in town, really, for any kind of concert that wanted to come down. And for some odd reason, Concordia allowed students to run this operation. It was literally called Student Productions. We had, Maury Lanning oversaw it with us, but we had a budget. We ran the thing. We booked the shows. And I started doing that when I was a sophomore with some friends. And then by the time I was a senior, they put me in charge of it. So I was booking concerts. But through all the last 3 years I was at Concordia, we worked with these concert booker promoters. But also we would have to book. For most of them, we'd have to get sound systems because in those days, the acts didn't usually tour with their own sound. They would make you hire it and bring it in if you didn't have it in your house. And so we hired this company out of Kearney, Nebraska to do the sound for us, and we got to know the guy who owned it pretty well because he would come up and do it. And my senior year, he offered me a job. You want to come and he wanted me to sell his sound systems ultimately, not necessarily be a roadie, but my first and ultimately only exposure was that I went down there. I took the job, but I had been looking for radio jobs around here too, or TV jobs, whatever, because I kind of wanted to do that. And my first exposure with him was driving an 8-ton truck full of sound, one of 2 8-ton trucks full of sound equipment from Kearney, Nebraska to the Greek Theater in Los Angeles for 10 nights of Neil Diamond concerts.
Wow.
So that was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
In fact, they recorded a big album that was very popular then too. So 10 nights at the Continental Riot House, as they called it on Sunset Strip, the Hyatt House. But in the meantime, then I got a call back from one of the radio stations in Grand Forks that I had applied at, and they offered me a job. And so, I was like, seriously, a couple different factors. If kind of wanted to stay, it was pretty exciting, being among all those people.
Right.
But also 10 nights in a hotel bar, around the rock and roll, I was like, I would have been an alcoholic and maybe even a drug addict,
Sure.
probably. What's going to happen to me? Not saying I wouldn't have had the fortitude to withstand that, but,
right. But
you're in that environment. And so, and then also my now wife was back here, and I'm like, if I don't go back, that's probably never going to happen.
Sure.
So
Smart man.
I have to give her some credit for having influenced me to come back from that job. So then I took the job doing radio news in Grand Forks at KNOX Radio.
Okay. How long were you there then?
A little over a year.
Okay.
We got married while I was up there, and so But then I got, after about a little over a year, I got a job at KQWB Radio here. They decided they wanted to have a newsroom. I was the newsroom. So that was fun, and then.
So you started that whole
Yeah,
station.
they didn't have any news. They had
Okay.
the AP wire, but they didn't have any local news, and they decided they wanted to compete a little bit. I could give you a whole hour on what it's like, what it was like, and it's interesting too. It has the connections to KFGO where you know, where we're housed
Where we're
right
at,
now.
right.
KFGO hired a new news guy right at the same time I started over there. He was a little older and had more experience, but still a pretty young guy. The guy's name was Jay Joyner. Ask anyone around. Ask Jurgi, he'll remember him.
Yeah.
A real hard-charging radio news guy. And he and I showed up about the same time as reporters covering local news, particularly like local government, city commission meetings in particular. And nobody really from those two stations had been paying that much attention. So
Sure.
It was like they didn't really know what to do with us. They only had so many chairs for news people at the.
You'll have to stand.
That's
You
it.
guys can both share that chair, huh?
Well, I was one time I got there early to a city commission meeting early, and I sat down at the press table. I was talking to the guys from Channel 4, one of whom I would soon replace. Like 6 months
Sure.
later.
Wow.
And I'm sitting with my back to the audience, and I'm talking to these guys. We're having a nice chat, and all of a sudden they notice they're looking up. They stopped talking and they're looking over my head. And I said, "What's going on?" And I turn around, and there's Howard Graber, who was a well-known local radio guy from then WDAY radio.
He's looking for his chair.
He's looking down at me, and I look at these guys, and they say, "You're in Howard's chair."
I thought you guys saved this for me, huh?
Yeah. So I had to go sit in the audience. Oh. Yeah. And then Jay came, and he had to sit in the audience. So then ultimately they set up another table for us.
Oh, well, good. Yeah, you paved your own way.
It was so much fun. I can't, when I look back on it, it was long hours, but we just had a good time, and you get to know everybody.
Yeah. So then you spent, the next 35 years in that industry?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
Seems like a long time, doesn't it?
So from doing that as a reporter to then being an anchor.
Yeah, Channel 4 hired me to be a reporter and photographer at the time, very small newsroom. And then I was weekend anchoring. But then, within a year, I was the anchor guy left and went to Milwaukee. And ultimately ended up Minneapolis for a number of years. Anyway, so then I started doing the anchoring, 6 and 10. And I was news director for a while over there. And
eventually, again, got back here again.
Yeah, so, I mean, I was so I was at Channel 4 for about 15 years. Before then, I went over to Channel 11. And I was there 21 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, very much a household name, a household face.
Has its ups and downs, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was around for a long time, and so yeah.
Yeah, and then you went into the management side of things too.
Yeah, I got promoted to GM of Channel 11 in 1998, late '97. But I kept working in the newsroom for quite a while after that. For 10 more years, I was still doing the 6 o'clock news. And then we went through 5 ownership changes in 15 years there.
Wow.
4 of them while I was GM. And it's kind of that's like professional whiplash.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
that's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a lot. And everyone, when I was still there, that bought us only bought the station to increase profits and resell it.
Okay.
There was a lot of that going around.
Just a
There still is, but
sale,
not as much because
right.
there's been so much consolidation. And so, we hung in there. The staff and I felt were pretty good survivors. And we got the last group that bought us while I was there. And I don't know, it was certainly at least partly my fault. They didn't like me, and I didn't like them very much. You can only adjust
who you are.
Yeah, and how you operate so many times in such a short span, and see, you just kind of become a little cynical.
Sure.
Okay, so
is that
so
what
yeah, I was. It said then so then it was they didn't really want me to stay, and I was kind of relieved.
Okay, so you kind of parted ways then.
Yeah, kind of for
kind
real.
of.
We really did.
It
It wasn't just
did.
kind of, Ashley. It was nope.
So, but at that point then too, it's an industry you've loved.
And I was not a young man even at that point, and this is that's 12 years ago.
12 years ago. So yeah, 12 years ago, you're like, well, I still want to do
13 years
something.
ago.
I want to be involved.
Yeah, so I enjoy. It was have one thing I learned was I got a little severance package, right? So I had the summer off, and I learned right then that I could see why teachers liked that gig.
Sure.
Having the summer off was kind of the bomb, and there was some family stuff going on at the time, and my wife's mother was ill and died that summer. So there was, in some ways, it was okay. I mean, I think the fact that I wasn't working added stress to her, but on the other hand, I think it was okay that I was around more at the time. I hope she thought that anyway. I don't know if she'll ever listen to this. We'll find out. It could be a subject of a debate. I don't know. Maybe she'd rather I'd been at work. So, that was fine, and it was great. So, and I had a few months, but I knew I was neither emotionally nor financially prepared to retire at that point. So, I started looking, and what I discovered was that even though I had managed those stations, first Channel 11 by itself, and then I was manager when we took over Channel 4, and helped integrate those two things together, which was a huge challenge. You can't imagine I couldn't have imagined what it was like to bring two competing cultures together and make them be a team.
Right.
Oh my God. it was
and live
like,
to tell the other side of it,
Yeah,
See the other
exactly.
side.
And it was interesting, because at the time, by that time, Channel 11 had surpassed Channel 4 in the ratings. And so we brought Channel 4 in, and I thought they'd be a little bit, prickly about it. But they were, most of the people working over there were ready because things had kind of gone downhill, and the company that had bought them wasn't really running it very well, they knew they were going to sell them.
Oh,
is what
right,
it was.
yeah.
So I think they felt like this was probably going to be okay. It was a weird arrangement to work with the other people, but the ones who were most had the hardest time adjusting to it were my coworkers at Channel 11. I distinctly remember, and I hope Robin forgives me for telling you the story, but we were in the newsroom like the day after the merger actually had been approved. So we set up a microwave link so we could share video, and we were still in separate buildings and hadn't decided how that was going to work yet. But we were going to share video because we're one staff now, right? And I come back to the newsroom, and she's sending them video, and she's kind of grumpy about it. And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "I don't get it. One day we're kicking their ass, and the next day I'm sending them video."
Sure.
I'm like, okay, now I think I'm beginning to understand the dynamic at play here. So it's not necessarily easy to marry those cultures together. And we made a lot of mistakes. It took us like 4 tries to get it right. 4 tries and at least 2 ownerships. But anyway, so so then we managed all of those stations. So what I found out when I left was that even though I had years of experience, 12 years of experience on the management side in addition to news, everywhere I applied for a job that kind of had a management, because that's what I'm thinking. I
could step into that
I think
role.
I'm a manager now, right?
Yeah.
I thought I was.
That's what I've been doing, yeah.
They're like, it's like, no, you're no.
Really?
You're the TV guy, It's like we don't really need news people here.
Interesting.
Not everybody loves news people either, by the way, actually.
Sure, yeah.
So that's another thing you discover. So I was, it dawned on me when I applied for like a general manager job. There was a well-known local law firm that was looking for someone just to manage the staff.
Sure.
Not a lawyer, just someone with management experience to manage the staff.
Okay.
I applied for it. I've got,
all these years.
I did this for 12 years. We had a multi-million-dollar budget. We had anywhere from 60 to 100 employees, and blah, 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 blah. And I had a bunch of departments under me, and I bet I can do that, And I get in the first wave of rejection letters. I'm like, and that was when it dawned on me that, and I knew some of these people, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe that was the problem. Anyway, I understand there are all sorts of dynamics at play, but it was at that moment that it dawned on me that nobody thinks of me as what I did the last 12 years.
As the manager.
They still only think of me as the news guy who doesn't really have any of that kind of experience. So that was kind of a rude awakening.
Challenge.
So anyway, I needed a job, and then I saw that WDAY was. Sorry to keep. I got to name all these.
Yeah.
Right? So you're leaving KFGO anyway, right? So it's okay. Moving, not amicably. Yeah. So I saw that they were looking for an anchor person at their satellite station in Grand Forks, and I thought, well, I really need a job, so I'm kind of at the point where I might want to have to go back and do that. Not that I didn't necessarily want to do something like that, but I kind of felt like should have moved on from that. And so I contacted them, and Cassie Walder, their young anchor and news director at the time, she'd been news director there for several years, but so she was probably the same age as one of my kids, she was probably early 30s. And she and the manager up there worked it out, and they hired me. So then I commuted to Grand Forks. They worked it out so I could do it 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday.
Sure.
And so that kept me going until the CVB job opened up. And I thought, well, I'll apply for that.
Okay.
Honestly, I thought that's where my life and career would end. My career would end in doing that in Grand Forks. And,
but then this new opportunity came then.
Yeah.
With the Convention Visitors Bureau.
Yeah. So
tell us about that. Yeah, because that's, I think, really interesting.
Yeah.
Was this a big risk now of like, okay, I'm stepping
everything's
into...
a risk.
Yes, everything in life is, yes.
Yeah, it was a risk for me, and it was a risk for them, I guess. Probably a bigger risk for them. It was interesting because I had applied for a similar job in Fargo Moorhead a couple times, actually, at the Economic Development Corporation. They were looking to hire someone, a longtime guy had left, and I applied for that, and they were using a headhunting firm from somewhere outside. And I didn't get a sniff, and I wasn't totally surprised at that. I didn't have any economic development experience. I just knew the community.
Right, I was saying, but you know the community.
I didn't
yeah.
even get an interview, right? And then before the CVB job opened, whoever they hired barely made it a year and left. Wanted to move back to the Twin Cities or something. Anyway, so I applied again. It was the same company.
Sure.
And again, I got the letter back, and this time I called the guy. I said, what? I mean, you don't even want to talk to me? He says, I mean, I guess it was an email exchange at that time. He says, you just don't fit the profile, and there are so many people applying for this job. I said, okay. So I applied for the CVB job when it opened up, when I heard my old friend Cole Carley was retiring, even though he's a couple of years older than I am. And I pretty much expected the same thing, because they used a headhunting firm. But at least this time the guy called me and he says, you don't really fit the profile, but I see that you've been around the community a long time, and I sort of felt like I should have just give you a call and just talk to you a little bit. And I said, okay. So we set up a time to call. And then, so he's asking me a lot of questions about management experience.
Oh, okay.
Came up. And he's
like, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah. Well, he says, so I see on your resume that you managed that TV station. He says, well, what kind of budget was that? And I said, well, I don't think I'm supposed to tell you, I said, but at the time it was like expenses were 7 figures and the revenue was 8 figures, right? And it's like, he says, oh, well, how many employees did you have? And I said, well, it depended on who owned us, because it varied. There was a lot of that, mostly shrinking by that time. I said, so anywhere from like 60 to 100, generally probably 65 to 70. He said, oh. And he says, well, at the CVB, the budget is like $3 million or $2.5 million, and they have 11 employees. I'm like, okay.
Oh, yeah, I could do that.
And so we talked some more, and he says, okay. He says, well, this has been interesting. He says, I've got a bunch of other people to call. Again, he said, don't get your hopes up because you don't really fit the profile, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, fine. But at least he talked to me, so I think that's nice. Yeah. But then he called me back like a week later, and the first thing out of his mouth again is, you don't fit the profile, but I feel like I should talk to you again. So then we had another call, and then I had a Skype call with him, and by that time I sort of felt like he was starting to coach me a little bit about the industry.
Okay.
And about it, and because it's all marketing, right? Yep. We're a destination marketing organization. So I'd worked in television, broadcasting my whole life. You can't say that's not marketing. I mean, of course I was exposed to marketing. I wasn't a salesperson, although when I was in management for those 12 years, I went on a lot of sales calls because that's just what you do. So I got exposed to it. My best friends in the station were one of them there's a husband and wife team. She was the promotion director of marketing. We worked together on news promotion for years and years and years and years.
Sure.
So you get exposed to how people think that way. And so it wasn't like I hadn't studied marketing, but I'd sure been around it.
Right.
And so that's kind of where the conversation went. And I said, I don't have a marketing education, but I have a lot of marketing related experience. And the other thing is I know the town, I know almost everyone in town, virtually.
Right,
And most people know who I am. So
right,
I said, I think that's where I could be an asset. And I've lived in this town my whole adult life. And I don't know who else is applying for the job that can tell you that.
Right.
And so it's like, so ultimately, I think I was the second at least the second choice, maybe the third choice, but it all worked out. But I think the recruiter guy, I think he ended up coaching me because I think I appreciated him because he saw the value of someone who hadn't had the same kind of experience. But remember that the guy I was replacing also came from broadcasting, Cole Carley. So I think everyone was kind of cognizant that there could be still a connection there.
Okay.
And he'd done a good job, so maybe we could do that again.
Yeah. Well, and also I think just the value of being from here or essentially.
Yeah.
You can't make that up. You can't teach that
No.
to someone.
I have literally forgotten more than most people know about Fargo Moorhead. Seriously, I have forgotten most of it.
Yeah. But I mean,
yeah.
there's just so much about the community that you can't teach an outsider about. Having that experience.
Yeah,
So,
you can't. Yeah, that's correct.
And you clearly love it.
Well, you said you've lived here your whole
Yeah,
life.
my whole
mostly,
life,
right?
yeah.
So there's a lot that you know about this place that someone who may, maybe you're competing for a job, and in a field like this, and someone comes from outside, maybe has more experience and more education in it, but
doesn't have that
they
experience.
don't have the institutional knowledge that comes
Right.
with, not really institutional, well, community knowledge.
Community knowledge,
So that
social knowledge, yeah.
it worked out.
Yeah.
And I was lucky. I was
so what
lucky
you said-
to get to have a career change so late in life, so late in my life when most people are thinking about retiring. So I don't.
What did your wife think of that?
She was glad I went back to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think she knows that I love it, and it's quite different from what I did before. I get to travel in this job. You don't really travel much when you work in a television station, But
Right.
now I've traveled a lot, and sometimes she travels with me, and we, it's. I shouldn't say this, but the one I remember the moment when I felt like I really had a chance for the job was like in the third call when this guy, the search firm, said to me, he says, "It's not rocket science," and I'm like, "Okay." Thank God, or I wouldn't be applying.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
But
because
I appreciated him acknowledging that, you don't necessarily have to have years and years of experience in this field to necessarily be able to adapt to this field.
Sure, yeah. And so what has it been now, 12, 13 years, you said?
I'm coming on my 11th year in June. I'll be
Okay.
at my 11th anniversary. Yeah.
11
I
years.
figure I got like 2 years to go,
Okay, yeah. Well, good.
as long as I stay healthy.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned it is a nonprofit. So
Yeah, we're a tax supported 501c6.
Okay.
Not a C3,
Right.
Although we have a subsidiary called the Fargo Moorhead Athletic Commission, which is basically our sports department. That's a 501c3, but we really just operate that as part of our budget. Yeah, we can't take donations, generally speaking.
Right. But you get it based off that lodging.
We are
hotel
funded
lodging.
almost entirely by the 3% lodging tax in Fargo, Moorhead, and West Fargo.
And I know you guys had a meeting yesterday.
We had our annual meeting, which we do every year, and go over. We went over 2022 stats. 2022 was a great year.
Yeah.
2020 was horrible for everyone. It was particularly horrible for the hospitality industry.
Right.
And I have told people since the pandemic hit, that I think it was kind of an aha moment for a lot of people around the state or even locally who recognized, who maybe didn't think about what a big part of the local economy travel and tourism is, and hospitality in general. And it's a broad category. I'm not just talking about leisure tourists, business travel, anything that brings people to town.
Right.
And we're involved in all of that. We don't seek business travel except we promote, except that we promote the city
yeah.
that way. But conferences and meetings are a form of business travel, so I guess we do to that extent. But all of those things are a gigantic piece of the puzzle, and I don't think everyone really understood that till we got to the pandemic, and we started having these weekly Zoom or Teams meetings, which I'd never heard of before. That
Yeah.
I know they were there, but nobody really,
Utilized them, yeah.
I didn't need it. And I started telling people how badly this had hit the hotel economy in particular, but also by extension, any retail, food and beverage, blah,
Oh,
blah,
yeah.
blah. And everybody could see how it shut everything down. So I think it kind of opened people's eyes a little bit to how big a part of the economy it is. So last year, hotel room business in Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, just in our three cities, only for hotel rooms actually, not food and beverage, anything else, $131 million.
Wow.
Well, that's, I'm sure there are bigger parts of the economy, but that is not chump change.
No. Wow.
So, and so in 2020, that
yeah.
fell to like 60 million.
Yeah.
Still seems like a big number, right? But that was down, and and prior to last year, the highest we'd ever been was 105 million. So
okay.
that was 25% higher than our highest previous record. But then conversely, in 2020, the hospitality industry basically suffered to the tune of like anywhere from 37 to 42%, depending on which sector you're looking at. So layoffs,
Yeah.
through the roof. The first week of the pandemic, our staff didn't have a lot to do, and so I said, hey, let's survey our hotels and find out about layoffs. And so at the time we had like 63 or 65 hotels. We got a hold of 45 of them, talked to us about it, and in the first 10 days of the shutdown, more than 1,000 full-time positions had been eliminated, plus
part-time.
a couple hundred more part-time. And that's devastating.
That's huge. Yeah. So I guess what we can notice from the numbers that are growing is one that people are back to doing business, and
they like to travel,
and better maybe than before.
Yes. I can't talk about a 25% increase in the hotel revenue without, obviously inflation had a little something to do with that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also see the room demand numbers, the number of rooms that were in demand.
Sure.
And that was up about 10%, 10 to 12%. I don't have that figure right in my head, but it was double digits. So it wasn't just inflation.
Right.
It was people coming back and wanting to fill the hotels, and that's great for us. We hope we can keep it on. Just before I came over here, I got this week's occupancy report, and so February, even the month of February, revenue was not growing like it did last year, but the revenue for February was still like 3.5% higher than it was last February. And January had been higher, 6 to 7% higher. So we're continuing to grow on the revenue side.
Right.
So
in Fargo, in winter, growing, that's great.
It's amazing.
It is.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And I mean, so something that we are doing right in our community, I guess. And I guess you guys have kind of coined the term north of normal.
Right. We rebranded to that in 2015, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we like it, so we're going to keep it for a while.
So we're doing things north of normal.
Right.
A little bit different. And, I love all the fun and quirky things on the website because, there's lots of things that come to mind when you tell someone you're from Fargo.
Yes.
But yet we have become, we've made such a new path, I guess, of Fargo when you say it. Now they're like, oh yeah, it's not. I heard the movie, seen the movie.
Yeah.
Now it's new things.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, in the movie, you can't discount the movie.
Oh no,
and we still have the wood
great.
chipper in our office.
Yeah.
And I've as long as I've been in this job, some of my peers and around the city would like, can't we just get rid of that wood chipper? That's such a bad image.
No.
I said, yeah, okay. So if you want to ignore the movie, I said, what if there'd never been the movie? I mean,
would we be on the map?
All these men and women travel, and I'm not saying nobody knew Fargo before that, but I said, so if you go somewhere and they say, where are you from? And you say you're from Fargo, what's the first thing that comes up? Like 7 times out of 10.
Right.
We're lucky because the movie wasn't even in Fargo.
Well, it was one scene was supposed to be the opening scene took place in Fargo. It was shot in Coon Rapids or someplace.
And then the second thing that people say will be, oh yeah, now I hear it.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's the other thing. When the movie came out, I don't know.
Yeah. I guess my grandmother sounds like that.
But a lot of people are like, we don't talk like that.
Oh,
I said, well, maybe you don't, but you know someone who does.
Yeah.
And of course, it was an exaggeration, but it's not. It's not too hard to slip into that,
no.
It's we just the way we are.
Yeah, it's not too far off.
I'm in town too then.
Yeah. And I definitely do sound like that at times.
We all do, yeah.
It's okay, and
Absolutely.
I embrace it,
So then, and if they mention the movie, then it's up to you where you steer the conversation after that.
Right.
We're more than that movie, or before they came up with North of Normal, I wanted our slogan to be "Find the Real Fargo," but I'm not the marketing guru that they paid to do this.
Sure, yeah.
But North of Normal turned out great. I'm happy
Yeah.
with it. But that's kind of what I tell people: you need to come here and find the real Fargo. It's not what you
might think.
Yeah.
Right.
And when we go around the country selling the business at trade shows, especially for meetings or Sports events, to some degree, I think our team does that too, but they kind of sell themselves on facilities. But when we're trying to sell conferences and conventions, we're like, we absolutely 100% guarantee that if you bring people here for a meeting, they will have fun. We'll make sure they have fun. You'll have a great meeting, but we'll also make sure that you have a good time while you're here, and they will want to come back.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah.
And I don't think we've ever failed in any significant way at that.
Yeah. What would be like your favorite part about Fargo Moorhead, West Fargo?
My favorite, that's a different question than I usually get.
Yeah.
I like the whole community, and I like the fact that that the town has grown enough. Remember, I've been here a long time, and I've seen the town, alter significantly from what it used to be, and change is hard.
I remember not wanting to go downtown.
Yeah. Well, I never. Yeah. Okay. But yes, people.
Yeah.
You hear a little bit of that
child,
now.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, "Oh, it's dangerous." It's not really.
No.
I mean, no.
That's
It's certainly
in any
safer
city.
than most towns you're going to go into.
Oh, for sure.
And actually, downtown is one of my favorite places. But the thing I was going to say is, yes, I like to go downtown. I'm not afraid to go downtown. My wife and I go down there at least once a week, sometimes twice. But that doesn't mean we don't also go elsewhere.
Right.
And the thing is, like in our community now, the town has grown to the point and diversified to the point where there are actually neighborhoods. And if you live in this metropolitan area and you say, I don't like to go downtown, it's too hard to park and blah, 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 it's okay because lots of people do, and there are lots of other places you can go.
Yeah.
It's like, we understand that.
You can go
south. You're not shut out if you don't want to go downtown. You're not shut out
It's
of
not
eating
like
and
it's
drinking.
the only
and
places to go, right?
Right. All sorts of other places. West Fargo, Moorhead.
Yeah.
And constantly reinventing themselves. I think that's the best thing that's happened in the last 25 years is how all of our cities, starting with Fargo, and I think with the downtown renaissance had a lot to do with it, have reinvented themselves and dealt with the fact that this is becoming a mid-sized city instead of a small town.
Right. Yeah. How about a fun fact about Fargo Moorhead, West Fargo, that people might not know?
Wow. You're the first person that's ever asked me that question. I must have like 50 of them that I could pull out, but I'm blanking on this at the moment. Just give me a second.
Well, I'll come up with an interesting.
Well, I think the fun facts are the rough and rowdy beginnings of this community that I think people don't really think about unless you go like to the Yumcump Center or someplace, or go here. My friend Marcus Krieger from the Yumcump Center when he does History on Tap on the first Monday. I'm giving an ad here. First Monday of every month during the school year, pretty much at Junkyard Brewing. Marcus is over there giving what he calls History on Tap, and it's all about a lot of it relates to brewing and alcohol and that stuff because that's where he is. But he gives you a really good, fun synopsis of the history that was rough and rowdy Fargo Moorhead when they first came to be, when there was actually barge traffic on the river, and that one side of the river was dry, the Fargo side was dry, and the Moorhead side was wet. So people came over to the Moorhead side to get drunk, and then they go back and end up in jail in Fargo. And so I think that's one of the historical fact of that and how the towns came to be is fascinating.
I think it's important that people learn some of these things too.
Yeah.
To just
We're
get a
coming
little
up
background
on
on it.
the 150th anniversary of us
Community,
in 2 years. Yeah, because I was here for the centennial. I was working at Channel 4, and they had the big celebration of the weekend, the Fargo Moorhead Centennial, and it was interrupted by a tornado outside by Glendon, and then torrential rain. It was an interesting week, but I digress. Sorry. Yeah, but that's 50 years ago almost.
So what? I interview a lot of entrepreneurs, and they've commented on like what a great community though this is to start a business, and the support of the community. So, and I know you guys are in the business of recruiting people to
Absolutely.
do business here, move here, whatever that might be. Have you seen like quite a big rise in people
Yeah.
moving here? And,
Well, yes, we need more, obviously. Unemployment's like always under 3%, sometimes it's close to 2%. Yeah, there is a tremendous entrepreneurial spirit here, or as my friend Greg Tavine calls it, the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I like to joke with people and say that, that guy's an entrepreneur with a capital A. Anyway, I know how it's spelled. It's a joke. It's a joke. So, but yeah, in fact, that's a really interesting question, and I think I appreciate the fact that our CVB board has come along with the idea that our job isn't just straight up tourists, right?
right.
We can influence things that elsewise bring people to town. Is elsewise really a word? I don't know. Anyway, you know what I meant, though.
Yeah, we'll add it.
So in fact, the first year I was in this job, I remember Greg Tavine, who runs Emerging Prairie.
So Greg and I went to school together in West Fargo before I moved to Moorhead.
Okay,
but yeah.
Cool, yeah. So anyway, he and Joe Burgum came to see me. This would be like in probably the fall of 2012, my first year. And they're like, hey, we got this idea, we got these things we want to do, and we really want to do things trying to encourage young people to stay in the community or come to the community because they like the community. Obviously they both grew up around here. Greg had been to the U of M, Joe had been away to school, but they came back, right? Mm-hmm. And their families are here, and so they wanted to do something. And we got, we'd kind of like to set up a conference of some kind. They didn't really have a clear idea of what it would be yet.
Yeah.
And they said, we're just wondering if there's any way you can help. And I said, if you bring anything you do to bring people to town, we will help, Cool. And so we maintained that connection, and they started doing stuff. We sponsored. We would give them sponsorships. Sure. Greg will confirm this. It's not a lie. That we have sponsored things. In fact, we actually helped when he kicked off 1 Million Cups. We supported them, bought the coffee for like 3 or 4 years to get them on help them with this, knowing that this was going to pay off down the end. So and I remember the economic development director at the time, CEO Jim Garton, before Joe Raso, came to me a couple of years into this. He says, so they're going to do this thing called TEDx. And I said, I don't know what TEDx is. I'm like, what is that?
Who's Ted?
Sounds like a gas station. But I'm kidding. Did kind of. Anyway, he says, do you think you have any money to help? We're trying to raise money to help support it because, and I said, well, how many people are going to come? He says, they're talking like maybe 100. And I think, I don't know. So, but I went and I said no at first, but then I decided we had some money in the budget, so I gave him some money for TEDx, right? And the first year was like a couple hundred people. Then it got to be like 300 or 400 people, and and then all of a sudden, like 4 or 5 years later, it's like 2,000 people.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, well, this paid off.
Yeah.
And so we'll keep doing that. And the same thing, they did this thing called Drone Focus for a while. Started with 80 people, it got up to 600. I see now they're doing their new Cultivate. They've been doing that for a while. This is associated with Grand Farm now.
Yep.
So
it's this summer.
So we and our board understand that things like this lead to people coming to town. Mm-hmm. In fact, our board actually committed a capital grant to the Grand Farm, which you wouldn't normally think is a tourism kind of thing, but we recognize the fact that they're going to bring, this is where business travel comes into play. Right. Why can't we influence business travel by helping support that? So they're going to have people coming to town. So I appreciate what they do, and it's all one big system, ecosystem, if you will, to use a buzzword. But we all kind of play off each other. And it's the same, and the same thing applies, of course, to the fact that everyone now finally has figured out that people in tourism promotion, destination marketers, yes, we're promoting for visitors, right? But we are promoting exactly the same things that the economic development people and the commerce department are promoting to try to get people to move here. Right. And people don't move here without visiting first.
Exactly. So that's You're just thinking outside the box a little.
Yes.
Of other ways. Well, people come to a concert. They come to a sporting event for their child, and they're like, you know what? This is a really cool community.
Exactly.
I kind of want to raise my family here.
The same things you do while you visit are the things you're going to want to be able to do when you live here. In fact, so we've been involved in the workforce effort for like 8 years at least, in and out. We've contributed money to it, and we're very happy to partner with that because I think we know how to market that way. In fact, the city of Cleveland actually gave the workforce recruitment piece to the CVB and gave them the money to do it and said, do it. You guys know how to do this. You should just do this.
Really?
So,
wow.
So yeah, it's all part and parcel of what we do.
And how many are on your team now?
Counting me, we have 12 full-time.
Okay.
We have a convention sales department, which isn't huge. It's actually just 2 people right now because we don't really have any true convention space. I could go on and on about that, but we might get some.
Okay.
The mayor's going to propose it soon here. He mentioned at the State of the Cities, dome renovations potentially will include a convention space attached. That would be a game changer for us from the meeting side. Sports is our big driver because we have great sporting facilities. We have a 4-person sports department because we saw that was where the growth was going to be for us until we got convention space. And it's paid off in a big way. And we keep getting more and more facilities. When I first started, we couldn't have the swimming events here much. Now we have the Hubbard Aquatic Center, world class, 1,100 seats. USA Swimming's coming here for things. We have the 17 lighted softball fields up in North Fargo that the Park District runs. Huge tournament attraction place. In fact, the USA Softball gave them their Complex of the Year award this year, which is a pretty high honor in those circles. And now we've got the Southside Sports Complex coming, which is going to open up basketball and volleyball indoor turf to us. We're going to have 8 basketball, volleyball courts, which we don't have anywhere in town.
Right.
It's another place where we've lagged behind, can't really do big basketball tournaments and volleyball tournaments.
Yep. Yeah, I remember.
I could go on and on.
Yeah, no.
And then we have our basic marketing department, which works toward the leisure tourist, manages our website, but they also work hand in hand with those other 2 departments all the time.
So is that some of your challenges of having this big wish list of what you wish we could have and kind of figuring out the funding of
2 big things? The 2 big things are convention space, and I've also been involved in efforts to ultimately build a true performing arts center here. And the idea is to put it where the Civic Auditorium is now. The Civic Auditorium has, basically outlived its. I mean, it's still being used, but it's not really modern.
Right. Yeah. They could definitely update that.
Well,
not update it.
Hopefully, we'll be able to
rebuild.
demolish it and build a true performing arts center there. That would be a great thing for the community. So, those are my 2 big wish lists. I think the meeting space we'll see happen here pretty soon, at least to get started on it, and then performing arts center a year or 2 down the road.
Yeah. So what surprised you the most about being a CEO of a company?
Of the CVB?
Yeah. Good or bad, I guess.
There isn't much in the world that surprises me anymore, actually.
I suppose.
So, but I think, from a personal standpoint, I'm a little bit surprised at how much I love it,
Yeah.
When I took the job, I knew it was going to be a new challenge, and I thought, I'm going to like this. I think it's going to be fun, but I had no idea how much I would like it. So, it's good.
Yeah.
Made a lot of new friends around. I had plenty of friends around the city, but now I have more, and great new young staff members in a different field than I was used to working in, but they're terrific. And then traveling, friends all over the country, all over the world, really, because we do some international marketing too.
Right.
So,
we just had someone here that writes for the New York Times. Wrote an awesome article.
Yeah,
that was kind of a neat thing.
Danielle Braff.
Okay.
Braff, B-R-A-F-F.
So all my relatives, of course.
Yeah. So
all my relatives sent me the article.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Can we talk about that just for a second?
Yeah, we absolutely can.
So that article came out, and state tourism was involved in it, you know. But this is a woman who actually came to the state and said they wanted, to us.
Yeah.
She went to the state of North Dakota Tourism Division and said, but she wanted to focus on Fargo, so they sent her to us, right? They helped send her to us. Danny from our marketing talent. We do this all the time.
Yeah.
We use what people call, you might even be one, Ashley,
Okay.
influencers,
Oh,
right?
sure.
Yes, yeah. People who, and there are a lot of travel influencers.
Right, yeah.
Travel writers, travel bloggers, all sorts of different names for them, right? But it's become a huge part of marketing for destinations like ours.
Sure.
And we have embraced it, and we budget for it, Yeah, they don't come for free.
Right.
They come for varying different things. So there was this hue and cry that came out after this article came out, and people are like, well, that was bought and paid for, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, a reporter at the forum called me, says, what was your involvement in this? I said, okay, here's the deal. They went to the state, this person came to us. Initially,
Sure.
it was to be in Travel and Leisure magazine, but then the New York Times got wind of it and wanted it. So
Very
that was
cool.
even a surprise to the writer.
Right.
To some degree, anyway. And so they asked for a little help. We didn't, in some cases, we'll help facilitate for them. That's what we do.
Sure.
Sometimes we will pay for their rooms. Not going to lie. That's part of what we do.
Yeah.
That's the way the world works now. I think very rarely would we don't really pay them a stipend, but we'll cover their expenses
Sure,
because
while they're
then
here.
they're going to
Yep.
sell the article or get advertising associated with it. Though we'll do that. We're not afraid to do that.
Yeah.
And first of all, we'll ask our hotel partners to help us. And in this case, actually, a hotel stepped up
Yeah.
and helped comp the rooms for this person. That's great. That's the way it should be, right?
Yeah,
If you're
right.
promoting the community and that hotel and the whole area that it's in, it's not, but beyond that, nobody. She asked our marketing department, Danny. She had looked at the website, asked about some things, helped me make an itinerary. I've
Sure,
got 2
yeah.
days or whatever, and so we do that all
It
the
was a
time.
great itinerary.
That's what we did. We
Yeah.
make connections where we introduce. Sometimes we'll pay for their meals, whatever.
Yeah. But not, not just genuine. I think it's still a genuine,
Yeah.
authentic article.
And it works both ways. We'll seek them out too.
Sure.
We'll sometimes our marketing team will identify someone that they think has 1 million or 2 million followers.
Right.
You should come here.
Yeah.
And then they'll strike up a conversation. But most of the time, it's the other way around, and they reach out to
Yeah.
us. And we do it in conjunction with the state. We do it individually. We do it in conjunction with Minnesota. Minnesota we have a foot in 2 states, so we'll have Minnesota tourism, North Dakota tourism offering us stuff. Sometimes they'll work together, which
Yeah,
is great.
But that is
so
the world
yeah.
that we live in, and that's
Yeah.
what marketing kind of looks like
That's
today.
what marketing is, yes. And nobody told her what to write.
Right. Yeah. So my aunt and uncle, they're originally from here, but have lived out in North Carolina and came back and basically went to every single thing on there.
Well, that's
you know.
good,
And I was
yeah.
like,
And I bet they weren't disappointed.
oh no, not at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
There's so much good stuff happening here, that it's the same thing. Like I said, I tell people if they're going to bring a meeting here, you will not be disappointed. There's so much we can help you do that you're going to enjoy this
Right.
community while
Yeah.
you're here. You're here such a short time, you're going to think it wasn't long enough,
Right. Yeah. You'll want to come back.
which is the way it should be when you
Yep.
travel somewhere.
It
right?
is. Yep. That you want more. Come
Yeah.
back. Yeah. So, what would be one piece of advice that you'd give someone that is looking to make a difference in their community?
Oh. Well, I don't think there's one way to do that except to get involved. You have to find a thing that you like to do. Maybe it's something you don't think is being done well.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
go ask about it. Maybe see if you can help with that. Try to do it from a constructive standpoint. Don't go in saying that stinks. You should let me do that. But it might be a way. I'm sure some good things have happened that way. But yeah, if there's something that you're interested in or think you could be passionate about, and you have time on your hands, then go and do it. Absolutely. Get to know your community. I think that's the most important thing
Right.
first. You and I both know that as much as we love the town and love to talk about it, it's my job. It's kind of like your job too, right? So there are lots of people who are like, "Oh, there's nothing to do here." There's nothing to do here, And our biggest challenge is combating that, like in the frontline people, the outer-facing people in businesses. You need to, because people ask you. People from out of town will come to you if you're working at the gas station, or if you're working at the hotel, or if you're waiting on them at a bar and restaurant. They're going to ask you, hey, what's your favorite thing to do around here? What's there to do around here? We don't want you saying, oh, there's nothing to do here but drink,
No.
That's not true. There are all
No.
sorts of things to do. In fact, we started a program called I Am Fargo Moorhead, frontline training program that we've passed off now to the Tourism Alliance of Fargo Moorhead, which we're heavily involved with anyway. But and basically, it's a training program for people. Initially, we did it for, thinking in terms of hotel desk people, but also bars and restaurants, and we've had all sorts of people. Anyone who wants to sign up can do it. It's like a half-a-day program with an hour or so of classroom about the different attractions, then a little bus tour around town to go
cool.
places you might never go.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important to be a tourist in your own city.
yes,
Like, get out there and just take it in as a new person,
yeah.
Like, what would I do?
This is not a real good example because it's such a new venue, but we had our meeting in the new Moorhead Armory event space yesterday.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Beautifully redone. I bet 50% at least of the 130 people we had there said, this is the first time I've ever been in here. This is really nice. Well, and that's not like it's the zoo or the air museum or something like that, but we've had that same experience at other places.
But now they know that exists.
Now they know it exists, yeah. So you need to go to these places and see what's happening.
Go try the new restaurant. Go try, something different that you haven't done before. Yeah.
Expand your horizons.
Yes.
Yeah, and listen to me talk. I'm pretty old, and I, set in my ways. I like my favorite places, but yeah, I like to try new things once in a while.
We go listen to you sing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's true.
Live music. Yes. Yeah. Tomorrow night, Sons in Our Way.
Okay. Yeah.
Back in the Troll Lounge is remodeled at the Sons in Our Way.
And that is a cool place to be.
Yeah, it's not. Don't worry, they didn't wreck it. They just made the stage a little bigger.
Okay.
New flooring. The bar's better now. It's the same bar, but it's more efficient.
Sure.
So yeah. The
Yeah,
moving
but,
parts back at the Troll
I'm
Lounge.
Norwegian, so of course,
Who isn't, actually?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Sornsin, I never would have guessed.
No,
Yeah.
well, that's maybe up for debate on that part, but no. But yeah, it's such a cool venue though.
It is. It's fun
I've
place,
been there
yeah.
for the lutefisk dinner. It
Okay,
wasn't
well,
that
that's
bad.
fine. Yeah. Did they have meatballs too?
They did, yeah.
That's what.
But anyway,
But there are lots of places.
yeah.
We need. You can never have too much live music around town.
that's true.
And I'm happy that we get to do a little of it once in a while. We just do it for fun. We're incredibly mediocre. But actually, on Saturday night, a first for us, we're going to play at Camp Lone Tree.
I saw that too.
Upstairs at 701. That'll be fun. Yeah.
Very fun.
But yeah, Swing Barrel. We're going to play there in a month.
So in your free time, you're doing this.
Yeah.
It's passion.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's fun. We just have fun.
Yeah, that's
We
good.
play songs we like and hope someone else does too. Yeah.
It's usually the music people like to hear.
Yeah.
Songs that they know.
Yeah. The music community in this town is very vibrant, and a lot of people passionate about it. And it suffered during the pandemic.
Right.
But fortunately, it's coming back. I'm glad the Blarney Stone is back in the Hodo, in the Hotel Donaldson downtown, and I know they built a stage. In fact, when I saw the Jim Pullman, the guy the owner, I saw him when they were remodeling. I said, "You're putting a stage in there, aren't you?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Because that was a highlight, for the Hodo to have music,
Great.
and I hope you can continue that." He says, "No, we're gonna try to have music in there once or twice a week." So.
I just had him on the podcast not long ago. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Did he confirm that?
Well, he didn't confirm anything about music, but
Sorry.
I think wait, maybe he said first act is Charley Johnson.
No, he didn't.
Is that
say
what he said? Maybe he did say that.
I'm pretty sure that's not true because he hasn't told me.
No. But well, Charley, this has been such a pleasure, such an honor
Thank you.
that you would be a guest.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
doing this, sharing
Sorry if I get too
You're-
long-winded.
No,
You know.
it's been great.
I can pretty much interview myself. So,
Well, I appreciate your time.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, what a great episode. Thank you so much for joining me. It's always so inspiring sharing these stories. Remember to like and subscribe. I would love if you could leave me a 5-star review. This helps us reach and engage with more people. Join me next week, and until then, make the most of your new day.